Hi Founder fans, Jason here, and today we're going to be discussing the first Archbishop in United States history. Our subject today is a man named John Carroll. Now before we get started, I should note, I am by no means an expert in religion, especially Catholicism. I am not a Catholic, but I am trying my best to use all the appropriate terminology. If I use terminology that is incorrect, I assure you it is a mistake. Please leave a comment and let me know if I do, because I'd love to use the right terminology for the rest of my life. With that out of the way, you might recognize John Carroll's last name, Carroll, because his brother Daniel would be a signer of the United States Constitution, and his cousin, Charles Carroll of Carrollton, which is one of my favorite names of all time, Charles Carroll signed the Declaration of Independence. So that is where you would have heard these names before. Anyway, John Carroll was from Maryland, which was a hotbed of Catholicism, and many Catholics lived there. It was a safe place, for lack of a better term, for Catholics to live at that point in time in history. But unlike other wealthy founders that were sent to London or even Scotland or Ireland for their education, John Carroll and his brothers were sent to France because that's where the Catholics were. So Carroll went to France, and after he became a priest there, he actually stayed there for about 25 years, teaching at the school he attended. Unfortunately, about 1773, the French started persecuting Jesuits, which, to my understanding, is we'll call it a sect or maybe a denomination of Catholicism. And since he didn't want to be persecuted, John Carroll came back to the United States and settled in Maryland. But if the year 1773 sounds familiar, it's because a revolution was about to erupt. And what happened was, there were different feelings throughout the separate colonies towards religions such as Catholicism. You know, in the middle colonies, they didn't much care about it. They were accustomed to Marylanders being Catholic. But you need to keep in mind that one of the intolerable acts was the Quebec Act, which, if we remember, we're only about 12 or 13 years after the end of the French and Indian War, and the British had conquered Canada, which was French and full of Catholics. And the Quebec Act said that these new British citizens in Canada could continue to practice Catholicism and also continue living under French common law. Now, while certain middle states were okay with Catholics, didn't love them, didn't hate them, many in New England were still very Puritan and really did not have a taste for Catholics. They really did not like the fact that we conquered these people. Why do they get to still be Catholic? Now, that is a generalization, and it certainly is not every person in New England. And I should note that these were changing times. And people, especially in Massachusetts, people's attitudes towards other religions were changing. Because just a decade and a half later, when the Constitution was being ratified, some of these same people would end up pushing for the first tenet, the Bill of Rights, and pushing for things like freedom of religion. So these were very important changing times, which is why we love learning about them. But with that being said, you know, the Quebec Act was one of the reasons that the northern states in particular really wanted to rebel. As we spoke about yesterday, you know, it wasn't just taxes, it was the land in the West and the Quebec Act, and several reasons. Now, John Carroll comes back to the United States and goes back to Maryland in this situation. And he begins preaching and he starts a church. But shortly thereafter, even though Massachusetts doesn't love Canada, and New England in general, a lot of the middle and southern colonies realize, hey, we need to get Canada on our side. They are British colonies. They should want to rebel with us, for the same reasons we want to rebel, and B, because they're formerly French. Why would they want to live under the British crown? So, Charles Carroll of Carrollton contacts his cousin John. Charles was a member of the Continental Congress at the time. John was not. But Charles contacted John on behalf of the Continental Congress and said, hey, we're going to go into Canada and have a little mission there and try and recruit some Canadians to join our cause. So he does this. And the thing is, John Carroll, at this point, with 25 years of being a Catholic priest in France, is one of the, we'll say, most knowledgeable Catholic priests in all of North and South America. Well, I'll stick to North America because, South America was heavily Spanish. I spoke without thinking. I apologize. But definitely in North America. So, John goes with this team to Canada to try and recruit these Canadians. It doesn't work. It does not go well. They seem to feel more comfortable with the British king promising them that they can be Catholic than these rebels who, the ones in New England right down south, really don't seem to care for us, so maybe we shouldn't side with them, is the main reason. But there are dozens of reasons they decide not to start a war. They also just lost a war recently. So it doesn't work out, but John Carroll becomes friends with a man named Benjamin Franklin, who accompanied the Carrolls on this particular trip into Canada. And this relationship would become very important. So years would pass, and John Carroll would kind of stay out of the revolution. Again, he was a holy man. He was more into the spiritual. He was a spiritual leader more than a political or wartime leader. However, things come to pass. His friend Ben Franklin, his new friend, goes over to France and is a minister to France. Where John Carroll spent so much time, and the people of France, at least in the right circles, know him. Now, Catholicism ran into a similar problem that most other religions did at the time of the American Revolution. And it was the Catholicism then, my understanding is to a lesser degree now, but back then, it was very strictly controlled. The Pope made decisions and they came down very particularly. But as far as the American colonies, they were under the control of the bishop in London. But we just threw off London, so we didn't really want to be taking any orders from people in London, spiritual or otherwise. So France, Ben Franklin is in France, and he brings this up to the holy men in the area and says, hey, what are we going to do about this? So what happened was Franklin actually is able to get them to use there's a term called an independent mission, capital I, capital M, independent mission, which is a type of a tool that Catholicism can use to set up churches or parishes. Yes, parish is the right word. Again, nervous about saying the wrong things. You could set up a parish that was not directly under the control of the Pope and the Catholic Church in general. Now, these were usually used for super remote locations, like out in the wilderness or an island in the middle of nowhere. Like, for example, I would assume Hawaii would be an example. I don't know for sure about that, but I would assume Hawaii is the type of place, super remote, middle of nowhere. You can't really communicate very easily with a place like that. And that's usually what independent missions had been used for to this point. But Ben Franklin, bringing to the attention of the Catholic Church in France that we need to solve this problem for the Catholics in the United States, the church actually agrees to set up an independent mission. And the reason is there was someone they had there that could do this. And his name was John Carroll. And the leaders of Catholicism in France trusted him enough that they got into the ear of the Pope and said, this is the guy, this is the play, this is the action we have to take. And it was on June 9th, 1784, just a few months after the war was officially over, we got the peace treaty back. All signed. War is done. Free country over here. Just a few months after that, Pope Pius VI, let me say that again. Pope Pius VI granted John Carroll the title of Superior of the Missions of the 13 United States of America. Now again, this was under the Articles of Confederation, where most states considered themselves separate countries from the other states. They just happened to have this firm league of friendship they called the Articles of Confederation. So, more or less, John Carroll in an instant became the most important Catholic in all of North and South America, because he was although he was only in charge of the United States, he had the highest title, because Very shortly after that, the American people requested, the American Catholics, I should say, requested a bishop. And they very specifically requested John Carroll. And because of his position as the head of Catholicism in the United States, he was granted the title of bishop. Now, not only was he the first bishop in American history, but he did a few things like help establish Georgetown University and build the first cathedral in the United States. You know, little things like that. But because of his work, he was granted the right to be named Archbishop. And he was the first Archbishop in the United States of America. Which, to my understanding, not a lot of people get to the rank of Archbishop in general, let alone in North America, where these colonies had just thrown a revolution. And on top of that, he was also allowed to name 3 other bishops in the United States. So not only was he the first bishop, he was the first archbishop, and he was able to name the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th bishops in the United States because of his independent mission. And he basically could do as he saw fit with Catholicism. And because of this, he more or less gave us the Catholicism in the United States we have today. Now, Catholicism in the United States is not particularly different, again, to my understanding, from Catholicism around the world. Other forms of Christianity have divided and had different sects and this and that have changed a lot. Again, I am not a Catholic, nor am I an expert in this, but to my understanding, Catholicism is still fairly similar. But what little differences we do have can almost entirely be traced back to one man, John Carroll, who was not of Carrollton. That's his cousin Charles. So I am going to leave you with that. Again, it's a little bit longer video today, but Catholicism played a very important role in the United States, as I said. From the beginning of the war with the Quebec Act all the way through to the Bill of Rights, Catholics being a major reason that freedom of religion was very important to at least the anti-federalists who demanded a Bill of Rights. So, I'm going to let you go for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit like. If you're new here, please hit subscribe. I got a logo over here. I've been trying to change the lighting a little bit. I have some other things to decorate the set coming in that I hope to unveil. It's going to be very exciting. So, thank you for watching. I look forward to giving you another video tomorrow.